Hey guys, welcome back to Goatman. My name's Joe Barlow, and today I've got another project deconstruction for you. This week we'll be taking a look at the Bifrost effect from Thor. If you've been watching the series so far, then you know this is part of a project I'm doing where I attempt to recreate a visual effect from every single Marvel film. I'm uploading these to Instagram before I do the project deconstruction, so if you want to see these before I do these videos, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, link in the description. Don't worry though, if you've missed the effect, here's that video now. Okay, so this time we create a Bifrost effect from Thor. Now there's a bunch of different reference shots we could use for this. We see it a number of times in the first film, as well as throughout the Thor series, and as well the Avengers we see it a couple of times. So specifically I'm going to be looking at the ones from the first film. I feel like it's only fair for this task, and you can see this is all from the first film. All these shots we see it a couple of different times, behaving in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's this big sort of sky twister, sometimes it's just a beam of light, other times it's less of a beam of light and more sort of shimmers, depending on when we see it in the film. I'm not sure why it's so inconsistent in the film, but they do seem to get a handle of it further down the series. Now I like this shot. This is one I took reference from because you sort of see it the most actually, and we get this nice beam of light, this big cloud puff, and then sort of shimmers coming through before sort of getting that final rest. So let's just take another look at this at a slower playthrough. So we start with this. Now this is something I didn't really pay attention to in the shots that I filmed. I didn't really get a shot of the sky or enough to do anything with. We've got these shimmers though, these lights, and they seem sort of separate. And we've got this outer aura to it as well, and that's something I definitely wanted to do. Now we've got that beam of light hitting the ground. Obviously there's some power behind that because we've got all this sort of dust happening, and then we've got these sort of light rays coming in, as well as the affected ground level there, where we've got the sort of light blowing it out, before finally this sort of light beam coming down, and that's when Loki appears in this particular scene. So with that in mind and all of the other shots from Thor, let's take a look at what I made. I was out playing with my boomerang on this lovely sunny day, and I decided to sort of quickly get the footage for this because there's a nice empty field, and I noticed this sort of big muddy puddle, and I thought that'd look great for where it actually hits. So I got a wide shot of it first, and this was something where I was going to get the explosion of light coming down, and then I got a close-up of myself here, standing in the muddy puddle. Now if you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen an outtake from this where I basically stood all the way in that puddle and got ankle deep in mud, which was a bit annoying, but it's the sort of things I have to go through to get these shots. Anyway, here we are. We have the two shots, and let's just talk through the first shot. So the first thing I needed to do to build this shot was, of course, add some light beams coming down from the sky. And to do this, I built my very own Bifrost animation. And let's just take a look inside one of these, just to get an idea of how I did that. I took a fractal noise, I adjusted a bunch of the settings you'll see here. So we've got the brightness, the contrast, and we've got these sort of strips going down. And that looks like this. It's sort of a generic speed force kind of thing flying down. Now I did toy with the idea of adding a glow to this, but once you layer them all together, it kind of bloomed it out a bit too much. What I did with that is pre-comp it, and I duplicated it a bunch of times and just sort of offset the layers a little bit so they would happen differently. And then using the hue and saturation, I adjusted the colors to sort of what we would see inside of Thor, giving us this sort of rainbowy sort of effect. And with that, I dropped that onto my footage. I scaled it up as well, added it as screen, and I did adjust the colors slightly more to sort of give it a bit more of a bloom on that saturation, and that ended up with this. So this nice dancing light is already happening. I went ahead and duplicated that and added a classic color dodge, and that just brightened up those colors a little bit more, made it look a bit more like light. So once I had this, I continued to build the Bifrost effect by creating another composition, this time called Mixed Bifrost. You'll see we've got some turbulent displace on here, Gaussian blur, and another hue and saturation. and this was just to make it look like it was a little bit more solid around the back and give it a bit of haze. I also duplicated this with more blur, this time a cross blur, sort of give it some more glow around the edge. Now you'll see there's actually a bit of an aura, which is something I saw in the reference shot and thought I need that to make it look less like loads of little lines and more like a glowing cylinder. Now that comes in with this layer here, where I added some spirit flame stock footage here over the edge, and that's what that looks like with that. It's effectively the Bifrost I created in that other composition mixed with the spirit flame, and once this is blurred in the actual shots, we don't really see it anymore, but we're aware it's there. It gives that sort of haze. So once I built this, I wanted to work on that ground level a little bit more. I added a hotspot in the middle. This is just a white solid that I've feathered, and then I added an area light, which sort of affects that outer area a little bit more. Now with both of these, I got the opacity there and added a wiggle to it, so it looks like it flickers, and that gives the effect of that light beam coming down and firing. As well as that, I also added a flare, which we'll add just in a moment, because I want to add the shockwave before I do, because this isn't really seen once we add the flare on. It was something I wanted there. I'd seen it in another shot where it comes down, there's all this sort of this dust and everything coming out of it, and it's less puffy dust, but ground layer affected. So I wanted to just add that in as something that was there affecting the ground. But as I said, once you add that flare in, it's a little bit less visible. It is still there, and I think it definitely needs to be there, but less visible with that flare. Now that flare itself, if we just take a look at the properties there, I've got it sort of dancing around. In fact, let's solo that layer. I've got it sort of dancing around, so it sort of gives that crazier sort of movement, as well as it flickering as well with the brightness. So that was what we had for that scene. I did go ahead and bloom that sun out a bit with another flare. I thought it looked really nice, and then added an adjustment layer just to focus on this area a little bit more, which takes us into our second shot. Now obviously, to build that Bifrost, it was kind of similar. You know, I had my Bifrost layer already, and I had my mixed Bifrost, so I added both of those in. Obviously the scaling was a bit larger on this one because we're obviously much closer to the effect. You'll see I'm already in shot, and that's something I needed to cover up at the very start of this scene, so we would sort of reveal myself a little later on. And to do that, I obviously just added a bunch of glows. We needed to add the glow to the floor anyway, so they came on, and that was that glow hotspot again, and that outer glow. And I'm almost covered up from that alone, so what I did was just add a little body glow, and this was just painting over myself, and what happens there throughout is that glow sort of looks like it's almost teleporting me in. Obviously we do a bit more work with this in a moment, which I'll show you, but that pretty much covered up me appearing. So one of the things I wanted to do was add the rune on the floor that happens after the Bifrost. Now to do this, I first had to get a 3D camera track. This was a fairly static shot to start with, so it wasn't too difficult. This was a static shot to start with, so it wasn't too difficult to get that. So I ran that through, got the data I needed, created a 3D track and a 3D camera. And with that, I dropped on an image I found online of the runes in 3D space. So it tracks nicely, there we go. But you'll notice my legs are on the wrong side of that. So I also needed to grab a rotoscope of my body and layer that on top of it. And now we have a pretty nice rune on the floor there. That wasn't it for the rune. I did also want to add some glow into it, so I added the cinder effect from the effects and presets over what we already had for the rune. And what I did with that is animate it so it does slowly fade out throughout the shot, so it looks like it's been burnt into the ground with that physical light and physical energy. And this actually appears from the start, but it's kind of covered with the glows as I am, and then you know the animation finishes, and there it is. It's all sort of there in shot, and the glows sort of slowly fade afterwards. Now with the animation for the Bifrost coming out, let's just talk about that quickly because I sort of skipped over it. All I did was create a mask, and the path shrinks on that mask. In fact, can we even see it? There we go. It just sort of does this, and that sort of lifts it back up, because I noticed from the reference shots it sort of goes back into the heavens, into the sky, and everything sort of fades out like that. Now we're almost there with the effect. We've got the room, we've got the Bifrost, but what we don't have is any interaction with the ground and with the environment. So obviously I went ahead and added those shock waves we saw in the previous shot. Now these shock waves are in the 3D space as well. So there they are at the very beginning, before everything sort of ends. We've also added some dust waves to that, and I also went ahead and added some sparks in there as well. Not something we generally see in Thor, but always nice to see some sort of interaction, especially when things have been set on fire and everything. And those dust waves and particles there help sort of sell the effect that everything's over and it's just this big burst of energy, it's just ended, which gives us something like that. And there was also a final dust layer on top of that, which just adds to that chaos after everything is sort of finished. Now that wasn't it for this scene. I've turned most things on, but you'll see there's these lightnings and these flares. So if we go ahead and turn all of those on, you'll see they're just sort of lightning beams that dance all over me. And this was just sort of my little nod that this is a Thor video. We've got a bit of lightning going on because he is of course the God of Thunder. The final thing left to do was add that sun back in that I had from the previous shot, adds that nice glow of it, and then a Gaussian blur adjustment layer there just to sort of soften the edges to bring the focus back in. And that was it. That was my Thor Bifrost. I of course went ahead and added some camera shakes to add to the impact of the Bifrost, and the two shots together looked like this. And that was the Bifrost effect from Thor. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I am uploading these to Instagram before doing the project Deconstruction here on YouTube, so make sure you're following me, link in the description. Next week we'll be taking a look at a visual effect from the first Avengers film, so make sure you subscribe here on YouTube. Until then though, goodbye.